the state of saves. Last season, Ryan Helsley led the position with 49 saves, the highest total in a season since Edwin Diaz had 57 back in 2018. I think we were spoiled a bit in 2023 when we had 12 relievers with 30-plus saves. Last season, that number dropped down to just 8 relievers with 30-plus saves, the fewest in a season since 1988. Scott, what do you think about the saves distribution, the most recent saves distribution, and the current state of saves in fantasy baseball?
Well, I will tell you, as somebody who writes a bullpen report close to every week during the season, I'll skip a week here and there when nothing interesting is going on. I found myself wanting to skip a lot of weeks early last season because things were surprisingly stagnant for the first 4 months of the 2024 season. Not many changes happening, everything just holding pretty steady. And then the trade deadline came and brought a lot of chaos with it. Now, I think that probably kept a lot of relievers from getting 30 saves who otherwise would have. I felt like, though, with that disruption mid-season, we kind of reached a point of stasis again at the end of the season. It seemed like the best reliever had stepped into the role where a role was made open again. The best reliever had come in and fill it. You had Lucas Erceg in Kansas City. You had Porter Hodge and with the Cubs. You had Ben Joyce with the Angels. You haven't had Blake Trinan in the postseason with the Dodgers kind of claiming the role. So things seemed pretty set again after that midseason reset.
And now none of the 4 guys you just mentioned are closers.
Exactly. Late in the offseason, there were a bunch of signings, a couple trades, and it was frustrating because it wasn't necessarily the teams where we had doubt that picked up potential closers. It was teams doubling up on closer candidates and creating murkiness where there appeared to be clarity. So it's been worse. I do think the bullpen committee, the closer by committee approach that was trending up around the league a few years ago, I don't think the fervor for that is quite what it was then. And so I do think a lot of these situations where we have doubt going into the season, they will settle down sooner than not. But when we're going to draft, there will be some doubt for probably like a third of the bullpens in the league. And you could even say it's higher than that, depending on what your definition of doubt is.
Yeah. And I still think that there are a few relievers out on the market where, depending on where they land, could maybe be in line for saves. Craig Kimbrell, obviously veteran, has been there, done that. Maybe a Hall of Famer, but there's a few teams that could certainly use someone like Craig Kimbrell right now, assuming
Kyle Finnegan is another one.
Finnegan, David Robertson, I think he's still effective and could potentially be a closer on a few teams there as well. Chris, same question to you. How do you feel about the state of saves right now in fantasy baseball?
So there was the little bit earlier on in the intro about how relief pitcher is my favorite. And I just want to be clear, relief pitcher is not my favorite. And here's why. All right. We're talking about inherently small sample sizes with which we're trying to judge the quality of the players. And that would be hard enough. But unlike every other position where really all we care about is how good the player is, like obviously lineup and ballpark and that stuff matters. But like how good you are is the primary thing driving player value at every position. And then at relief pitcher, it just isn't almost at all. And so we have to not only figure out who's good when we're dealing with like Felix Bautista has thrown 100 major league innings in his career. Like we think he's pretty good, but he's coming back from time. But we have to figure that out. Mm-hmm. And then we also have to figure out who is going to be their manager's favorite, their number one boy for the 9th inning. And I don't know. Mm-hmm. Nobody knows. Like this is the worst position to analyze for fantasy because we're just guessing. And we are making educated guesses, and a lot of this is making educated guesses, obviously, but like this is the one where like we don't really know any better than anybody else. Like we're not we can only offer our perception from the outside, and then reading the tea leaves and the tarot cards and hoping that we can, you know, find the right answer there. But it's the worst, and the payoff is so small, right? Like the food was terrible and the portion sizes were so small. They help you in one, sometimes 3 categories, but even then not as much as you would like. And so it just relief pitcher's the worst. I hate it.
I try not to overcomplicate it. Okay.
Yeah.
To me, it's really not a question of how good a reliever is. It's just, is he good enough to keep the job?
Mm-hmm.
And is he the best reliever in his bullpen? And if the answer to both of those questions is yes, then he's probably fine.
Yeah, he's probably a very good closer.
If the answer to either one of those questions, I'm not confident he's good, I'm not confident he's the best in his bullpen, is no, well, then he still might be fine, but you have reason to be kind of worried.
Well, yeah, like Kyle Finnegan was neither all that good nor the best reliever in his bullpen for most of last year. And he ended up, top 10 in saves?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I think top 5.
Yeah, like it's dumb. It's dumb. But yeah, it's like a decision tree, right? It's like, are you good? No. Okay, you're probably not a closer, although occasionally, I don't know, the Rockies still exists. The Marlins, I don't know. Like, I don't know if Calvin Fauché is good. Are you good? Yes. Okay, you might be a closer. Does your manager like using one closer? That's a big one. We don't really know.
Yeah.
How much
we got an idea who doesn't.
How much does your manager trust you? How likely is your team to just sell you off in June or July? Like there's just so many ways that things can go wrong that it's just inherently difficult to project. And whatever, it's fine. We can talk about it.
One way around all of this is to play with saves plus holds. And more people are doing that. We've been getting a lot more emails and questions about holds leagues or saves plus holds as a category. And part of the reason why people are transitioning into that way of playing fantasy baseball is at that point, you just draft skills, right? Like,
well,
I think most of the time, the best relievers on good teams are either going to get you a save or a hold. I think most of the time.
Yeah.
So you can really focus mostly on just drafting the most skilled relievers in baseball.
Unless you have an insanely deep league, though, the supply is so high that you never have to worry about running out of holds targets. Like to me, it's like anytime somebody asks for saves plus holds advice, it's like draft as many saves plus holds guys as you think they need, and then change them out if it's not going well. That like it feels like kicker. It feels like the whole point, if you're converting the saves category to save plus holds, the whole reason you're doing that is to eliminate the relief pitcher complication. So don't complicate it. Approach it like you would kicker in football with your last 3 picks or whatever it is, however many you think you need. Draft relievers who were good last year, and keep checking the waiver wire to see if it like you would as a kicker in fantasy. If you're not happy with the way they're going on your team, check the waiver wire, see if somebody's doing better, swap them out. Right? It doesn't have to be more complicated than that.
The one thing I will say is there are at the higher end more saves than holds. Generally speaking, there were a few exceptions last year. Brian Abreu had 38 holds last year.
Yeah.
Yanier Cano, Andrew Kittredge had 30 plus holds each. So like what it does is the best closers should still have an edge in a saves plus holds league, but you go from, what was it? 10 guys who had, no, it was like 8 guys who had 30 plus saves last year.
Yeah.
To 25 had 30 plus sholds, let's call them. And so what you can really, what you can do is it raises the overall bar. There are your Scholds league is going to have more Scholds than your saves league will have saves. And so you do have to account for that, but you can mostly just target the best pitchers. Like we're going to tear our hair out worrying about Tanner Scott versus Kirby Yates and how to rank that. In a saves plus hold league, it might just be they're the same guy. They both might just get 30 each.
I guess my point just is, you could maybe find marginal gains within the saves plus holds category, but the premium you're going to pay for that, it just isn't worth it. There are great setup men that emerge every year that nobody sees coming, and I know the podcast For the People League, which isn't even that shallow. It's 16 teams. We do saves plus holds in that. And I've always just used my last 3 picks on a reliever who I thought would work the 7th, 8th inning frequently. And I don't usually stick with them. I usually trade them out. But who I eventually settle on is fine. I do as well as I need to do in the category. So it's just not something I worry about that much. I get it if you want to do that and remove the complication, but understand that's why you're doing it and don't stress about it so much.
Yeah. And to your point, Scott, about just being able to find holds relievers on the waiver wire, there were 100 relievers with 10 plus holds last season. There were only 39 with 10 plus saves. So it's just the bottom, the 10 to 20 range in holds. There are many more options than there are that are actually giving you saves. And it makes sense because if you just look at the stat itself, only one reliever can get a save. Multiple relievers can get a hold.
Yeah, you have 4 guys get a hold in a single game. Only one could get a save. So that's the primary difference between the two of them. But I think Scott's point is correct. It's just you shouldn't have to think that hard about it, and you can just draft the best pitchers. And I still think Emmanuel Clase is worth the premium, right? Because that dude gets 45 saves every year. We're not talking about 28 saves or 32 saves. Emmanuel Clase gets really big save numbers every year, whereas most closers, even now, even the ones who hold on for Kirby Yates was arguably the best closer in baseball last year. He had 35 saves plus holds. That was the same number as Aroldis. He had 1 fewer than Aroldis Chapman last year.